Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, it's kind of become a meme. President Biden passively watching his own presidency and wishing someone with power would do something. The latest example here with guns is particularly galling. Biden gave a speech about gun violence when he visited Uvalde. He tweeted out some encouraging words about turning pain into action, and then he kind of promptly checked out of the whole debate. The White House would not even put representatives on the Sunday shows to make a case for anything in particular. Vice President Kamala Harris seemed to freelance, calling for an assault weapons ban while speaking at a funeral for one of those slain by a racist killer in Buffalo. Congressional leaders, though, they seem to be uninterested in following her guidance. The bill being contemplated in the House includes bans on bump stocks, lifting the purchase age, cracking down on straw purchases, among other things, but it doesn't actually contemplate a return to that assault weapons ban. Biden himself uttered something about getting rid of high-caliber handguns, sending the right wing into total freakout mode, before then promptly leaving that debate and insisting it was not up to him to get involved in any negotiations about guns whatsoever. Among other comments, he said, quote, "I can't dictate this stuff. I can do the things I've done, and any executive action I can take, I'll continue to take. But I can't outlaw a weapon. I can't change a background check. I can't do that." He then went on to admit he was not involved at all in negotiations, had not talked to a single Republican about any of it, but that he had blind faith that Mitch McConnell would act in good faith because he was a, quote, rational Republican. Imagine being president of the United States and acting like you have no power to do anything but send a tweet and hope that things work out. This is far from the first time through the entirety of the Build Back Better debacle. We never once learned what the president's actual priorities were or what he might fight for. Instead, he allowed Manchin to toy with the country for months before shooting that entire project in the head. On union rights, Biden proclaimed he'd be the most pro-union president in history, but has instead mostly sat on the sidelines. The one time he dipped his toe in the water of direct encouragement of Amazon workers, his press secretary immediately jumped in to make it clear that Biden was not actually on the side of workers.
What he was not doing is sending a message that he or the U.S. government would be directly involved in any of these efforts or take any direct action. What he was conveying is his longtime support for collective bargaining, for the rights of workers to organize, and their decision to do exactly that in this case, something that he has long supported broadly over the course of his career.
It's a passive mode of anti-politics that I frankly associate more with the professorial Obama, watching from above, analyzing like a pundit, never willing to actually get in the mud to try to get things done, to turn hope into an actual course of action. There's a new report out, though, that Biden is completely mystified by his low poll numbers. He's now lower than Trump, and he's really twisted about it, according to one person close to the White House. That same report claims that Biden was shocked to find he had dropped with one of his support bases, suburban women. The White House, absurdly, has seemed to take these poor poll numbers as a sign that Biden did too much too fast. As David Sirota points out, this is pretty ridiculous. Of the voters that disapprove of Biden, 2/3 say he could do more if he actually wanted to. What's more, his largest drop-off has been among young voters, the cohort that backed Bernie, of course, by the largest margins, and is the most progressive and the most interested in large-scale change. Biden spent his entire life chasing the brass ring of the presidency. And now that he has won it, he seems to have no interest in actually using it and is mystified that anyone would want him to. Now, it would be tempting to blame this devastating failure to act when multiple intersecting crises demand it on the personal characteristics of Biden himself, on, say, his commitment to a bygone era of bipartisanship, on his senior moments, on his committed centrism. But the truth is actually a lot darker. The current Democratic Party is centered on a bedrock opposition to actually governing. Governing means that you have a specific vision and you fight to implement it. It means you have a worldview, an ideology that you believe in, and you use every tool at your disposal to actually execute on it. Now, Republican elites, in my opinion, have a horrendous worldview, but they are not afraid to govern. They will shove their preferred curriculum down your kids' throats. They will give the rich their promised tax cut no matter the obstacle. They will spend 40 years relentlessly vetting Supreme Court justices and federal judges for compliance with their ideology, and they will use every trick and violate every norm to get as many of those vetted ideologues into positions of power. While Democrats run around promising that they don't really want to change anything at all, and worst of all, they actually mean it. This posture goes back at least to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton did a lot of things when he was president, many of them bad, But it would be a mistake to view his presidency through anything other than the lens of getting Bill Clinton reelected. He ran as a populist initially, then he quickly slid into being a sort of standard Koch brothers Republican, passing NAFTA, tax cuts, deregulating banks, ending welfare, obsessing over the budget deficit. And he persuaded everyone else in the Democratic Party that abandoning every principle in the service of getting elected was the thing that serious people did. This approach to politics came at a time when the corporate purse strings were opened wide by a series of Supreme Court decisions. So in the Clinton formulation, you could cash in on that corporate bonanza, and you could delude yourself into thinking that you were somehow still doing right by the people. This directly led to a type of anti-politics. Rather than pushing for anything, you just try to position yourself wherever you imagine the average suburban voter is located, and that suffers from any number of problems. It takes for granted that attitudes are a given and can't and shouldn't be moved, especially by prominent politicians and by media coverage. It leads to the foolish and racist assumptions undergirding the demographics is destiny analysis. The idea that young voters and voters of color will just naturally vote Democratic meant that Democratic elites didn't have to do anything. They could just keep taking that corporate cash and wait for the rising demographic tide to lift their sold-out votes. It leads to politicians who are terrified of every existing and potential Republican talking point. Just see Joe Biden afraid of even calling for an investigation into the morally atrocious lack of response by police in Uvalde because he was so afraid that Fox News might accuse him of hating cops. And most of all, it leads to facing down multiple devastating threats to the nation and the world, with the return of the Trump maniacs there on the horizon, and twiddling your thumbs because of the filibuster or the parliamentarian or your unwillingness to face a court challenge to an executive order. It leads to having control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and still bemoaning your complete impotence. And yes, Mr. President, it leads to some pretty dismal poll numbers as well. I mean, you just can't look at the entire thing. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.